Welcome to Uncover the Human, where every conversation revolves around enhancing all the connections in our lives.
Whether that's with our families, co-workers, or even ourselves.
When we can be our authentic selves, magic happens. This is Alex Cullimore.
And this is Christina Amigoni.
Let's dive in.
This episode includes our interpretations of copyrighted works done by the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, or iPEC. Well, welcome back to this episode of Uncover the Human. We are continuing our series interpreting some of iPEC's material on core dynamics. This one feels like a good crossover hit between Uncover the Human and core dynamics because the discipline we're talking about today is authenticity. So this is kind of an exciting, crossover hit for us. This has been what we've been exploring the entire time on the podcast. It's the fifth discipline on the list of them. This is where it really starts to, I think, not be as sequential. We've talked a lot about, awareness then begets a practice of acceptance, and then you can do conscious choice, and then you have to trust the process. A lot of these, and they all kind of interplay with each other. A lot of the next six are just great disciplines in general and are all supported by, especially by the first four, but they may be less linear in nature. So this one's just kind of a fun one to jump into and an incredibly powerful place to start when you're thinking of mindset.
It is. Yes, and a great crossover with our podcast. We should be experts on authenticity at this point. Even though it may be an oxymoron.
Authenticity is interesting that way because it is almost an oxymoron to try and be an expert in authenticity. It's such an exploration and such an endless journey. I mean, the old quote is like the only constant in life is change. And so to be authentic, you have to also be authentically changing. It's not like you discover this authentic self and you're there forever. Even if there are core components and threads you can tie in that will last for a lifetime, it's not all the same. And every chapter of life is different and every expression can be different and it's still authentic. And that's kind of an interesting dichotomy to have to hold in your head.
It is. And if you think about in the trust the process, which was the last discipline, part of it is believing and accepting that we are a work in progress. And so the process of us discovering ourselves and growing, it's constant and it's always going to be a little bit different. Authenticity goes very well with that. As in my authentic self now, it's different from my authentic self in a minute, in 5 minutes, in an hour. And so it is a constant discipline. It is a constant exploration and it's constant practice to show up that way. It's not a medal. We don't just say I'm authentic and I'm done. There's my trophy.
Oh, that's such a good way of putting it. We don't get to a finish line on this. And it very much goes to the mastery mindset too, of just there's an endless work in progress. The interesting change, I think, I like how you mentioned that trust the process relies on us being a work in progress. And one of the interesting things about authenticity is that while it takes diligence and it takes effort, it is about being. It is about that you are at all times a work in progress, but not that you are moving necessarily towards something. You will be inevitably changing, but authenticity goes back to this natural state of being. And when in core dynamics, they talk a little bit about the kind of difference between forcing and just you being. If you're forcing and you're being effortful, you're putting on a mask, you're something that's not necessarily authentic. It takes work, it takes effort to be that, to put on that facade. And authenticity is so much more into being and trusting that you are you and you are enough and you have you are unique and that's all as should be.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. And once you learn to embrace your authenticity and have the courage to put it out there and you're accepted, so you feel the acceptance and the value on the other hand from it. It's amazing how clear it becomes how much effort it takes to not be authentic and how much drainage of energy it takes. And at least for me, I actually get physically disturbed when I feel like I'm not being authentic or I'm not allowed to be authentic. I don't feel that the space allows for that. And I remember when we, in one of the many temporary ends with one of our clients, in one of the last meetings of a series of meetings, we provided some acknowledgement and gratitude at the end. And the only thing that I could say to them was thank you for allowing us to be us, because they allowed us to show up authentically every time in every meeting. And they accepted us and valued us for being us. And it was so liberating and so energizing. that it allowed for a lot of the earlier disciplines of trusting the process. When we didn't know which way we needed to go, when they didn't know which way they needed to go, there was a lot of just trusting the process. Let's just go through the motion. There was a lot of awareness and acceptance and conscious choice on how do we want to show up, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what do we want to do here. And then we'll look at the future disciplines, but allowing us to be us got us to be fearless. Fearlessness is the next discipline, but that was definitely a key component of being able to try new things and see how they go. And if they don't work, we'll tweak, but without having to put this facade and this armor. And, especially working with us, they realized pretty quickly that we're not the typical business stuffy like. And so we got to use memes and GIFs and jokes and cartoons in slides. And we got to, start meetings on Friday mornings with pictures of puppies because it was a Friday morning and it was the end of the week. And we knew it was a stressful one and it was a good way to lighten up the mood. And so those are the pieces that really, I think, allowed us to expand and do a lot more than we probably would have done if we had to fit in a mold. Well, honestly, we probably wouldn't have fit in the mold. We would have just said our goodbyes.
We would have just been rubbing along with a lot of friction. Yeah.
Yes, we would have been part of the very long list of consultants that don't make it past a few weeks.
Yeah, that is a great description of how it felt on the inside. We definitely got to be ourselves. And what that then unlocked was we could then be fearless and we could deliver so much more value as ironically business value by not putting on this business front. We ended up able to create all kinds of space that to open up a bunch of change possibilities. And then anytime we'd come up with ideas that we knew were going to be met with resistance but necessary in the long term, we'd have jokes and cartoons about change management consultants because we were kind of billed out as that. And so we'd have one. My favorite one is the one with two guys walking along and they're like, oh no, I think the staff loves that we hired change management consultants, but you can see other people ready to dump a pile of goo on their head. It's a Carrie moment, but it's those are the kind of things that we're happy to we know that it's going to become frustrating. We're here to also create the value. We're going to create the space to go help the whatever we're promoting deliver successfully. And because they'd given us some space and we were giving them space, it became a great partnership, but it was much easier for everybody to deliver a lot more value than was going to be present before. And I mean that in the business sense, because that's kind of the important value exchange, but it also became just a comfortable way to work and be.
Yes, it is. And one of my favorite things about authenticity is that the more we practice this discipline to show up authentically, the more we create the space for others to do the same. We're giving permission for everybody else to do the same. So if it's about loving puppies, if it's about joking, if it's about having a bad day and showing up and actually saying it's a bad day, any of those things become allowed, and there's a space for that, which also allows for then the gifts and the talents of that person to show up as well, because there's so much effort that we put into armors and masks and 10 layers deep of what we should be saying and how we should be saying it, and the tone and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, that we forget who we are. Learning to live in that authenticity, to go through the discipline of authenticity, really gives you permission to be you, and it frees up infinite possibilities.
It is incredible the amount of power that is created and then shared. I think that's the best part about authenticity. And it reminds me of something we mentioned a couple of times on the podcast of there's the idea of rugged individualism, where it's every person for themselves. And there's rubbing up against each other in an unhelpful way. And then there's the idea of soft individualism, where it's everybody is still themselves and expressing that fully, while that is okay in a system of other people also expressing themselves. And so that soft individualism, where all of the individuality can be brought together and all of that power can be harnessed. And I think that's the real core of human power, comes from that authenticity. And I think so much of the coaching that I do with leaders and that we do with clients and that we do in facilitation is about helping people find that authenticity. I mean, so much of it is we get so much in our own way, thinking we should be some way else. We have to be some other way. We're too caught up in what mask we have to put on, that when we put that down and we really invest in knowing ourselves and what that unlocks, it's so much easier. It is that the difference between living in power and living in force and having to force something through versus just living with power that you're exuding that other people will feel and then unlock their own. And it is incredibly potent as the more you get into it. And I'm very glad that we've gotten to get on this journey to go experience that in the workplace, at a place that especially can be pretty crushing on trying to be yourself.
Indeed. Yes. Well, and I think, the way the podcast started with the overall theme of authenticity and how do you live an authentic life? How do you discover your own authenticity? What does it mean? It allows us, and the timing of it, having to work on the podcast during COVID and then having more client time once the podcast was up and running, we had already given ourselves permission to be authentic, and we already knew what it felt like, which is something you can't unlearn. Once you get there and you have that feeling, you want that feeling to be there all the time or as much as possible. You don't want to really compromise how much it's there, because you see the possibilities of what can be done. And so once, we started having to do both podcast and a lot more client work, in my mind, at least, it was a lot easier to first show up authentically. And second, if I couldn't, walk away and not compromise that, because I knew the feeling, like I knew what was possible in authenticity. And, it's one of those things that as we look at life and we look at the one finite thing is our time in our lives, then, well, sorry, but I'm too old to have to show up as somebody else. You want somebody else, then hire somebody else. It's that easy. I can give you names. Tell me which mold you want and which puppet or which type of, persona you want. And I could probably recommend you other names, but this is who we are. This is how we show up. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And that's it. There's no harm. There's no foul. It's just, it doesn't work. And when it works really, really well. Yeah.
Once you've gotten out of that box, like there's no climbing back in. Like that's the most miserable thing in the world, to go try and fold yourself back into a into a mold. Yes. and you feel that effort and that pinch, and it really does constrain who you are and what you do. And you kind of constantly feel like you're bumping up against a barrier that, once you've experienced it, doesn't have to be there. Once you know that, you can't unknow that.
Yeah, you really can't. And I find it, if I look at my why as being, the quote, make sure that, to make sure that everybody feels like somebody, it's the authentic selves. It's just the authentic somebody. And when I see that in others, I find life meaning, honestly. It's like my life has a meaning because I see it. I see them shine. I see all these stars. And it's incredible to be able to provide that space, whether it's juggling in the middle of a leadership training, because at some point we joked about juggling and then two people were actually really good jugglers. So they started juggling or, singing or dancing or anything that comes up, making jokes at ourselves, at each other, at others. There's so many ways that it can be manifested, and you just feel the walls come down. It's almost like you can see them come down, and you see the potential, not just the potential, but you see the real magic, the real person, and everything that they are capable of doing and everything they are. One of the biggest compliments that we have been getting, thankfully, very often is thank you for being you. It's not thank you for doing this, not thank you for the PowerPoint, not thank you for that, not thank you for the model, not thank you for, no, it's thank you for being you. That's when I know we've showed up as us, because that's the gratitude we get.
We got luckily a couple of comments that were, there's so many people that have gone through so many trainings that they're like, I just expected to be bored. I saw like 3 days of training and I was not bored for any of the days. Like that's the point. That's the fun. That's the engagement. That's where you have them. And I remember our guest, Matthias, would describe authenticity as like the sun. The sun is like your authentic self. It's always there. There are sometimes clouds in the way, and there's sometimes things we let get in the way. But it's always there. And so I've felt like that when you get to see people, you see glimmers and poking through and some shining and the moments where you're like, there's the person, there it is. And you just like all you want to do is wipe the clouds away as fast as possible. And when you get to see people like really step into that, that's just incredibly fulfilling.
It is. Yeah, I love that description of authenticity that Matthias provided. And when we think about the discipline and core dynamics, what it helps through coaching is to figure out how can we wipe away our own clouds, and how can we help others as well wipe away, create the space for them to wipe away their clouds. But it's the power of the discipline. I think it's recognizing when there are clouds and knowing how to wipe them away.
Yeah. Yeah, when we talk about things like levels of energy, authenticity is one of those that feels like one of those core, like almost like level 7. This is just an expression of like full on personal power of like, I can just do things and this is who I am. And you don't worry that much about people who, that this is who you are. That you can provide help. You can be connected to people, and it won't connect with everybody, and that's fine. And there's comfort in that too. And just knowing that, like, and same for like the business, like you were just talking about, like if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. It's not even like blaming them. It's not a bad thing. That's just not the fit for us. That's fine. You want to do something else, you can do something else.
Not a problem.
But we'd like to move at 10x speed, and we can only do that if we can be ourselves. Like once you've moved at that speed, you get to you don't want to slow yourself down.
Yeah. Another great analogy. It's like you don't want to slow yourself, but you really see it as a waste of time. It's a waste of time and energy. It's like, if I can't be me, then I don't need to be here. There's other rooms, there's other places, there's other people, there's other opportunities where I can be me. And I'd rather spend my time there, because I'd rather go to bed at night and think about was I able to show up as my authentic self today? If the answer is yes, then it was a good day. If it was no, then something needs to change, because there's so many days of no that you could possibly tolerate without starting to get into health issues that affects the health, well-being, mental being, relationships, success, career success, business success. It's all interchanged into the type of energy that you put in there, and the type of energy depends on was I accepted as me? Was I valued as me?
I think that's one of the best ways to get in touch with whether you are feeling authentic or not, is what type of energy is used. Like we all have like some physical limits. Like I really feel engaged when we do like these leadership trainings. It's really fun. There's full days of engagement, and at the end of it, I'll be physically tired. I'll be a little worn out, but it's a very different type of tired than being emotionally tired. Like a day of networking, after an hour, I'm going to be tired, and 8 hours in, I'm going to like want to crawl into the couch, like inside the couch, and just sit in the dark.
Well, at least you made it 8 hours. You made it an hour. Just the thought of networking makes me want to crawl inside the couch.
It is, I think.
And hope for another pandemic so nobody has to go anywhere.
Please don't make me network.
I know, please don't. Not a room full of surface level conversations.
It is because of authenticity, though, too, I think, because it's like those surface level conversations, the titles, the this is the thing that I'm trying to promote or trying to get promoted. Like it doesn't come across as authentic because there's no relationship built yet. Like building relationships is fine. Like meeting new people is fine. If you do it under the auspices of like, and we're going to trade business cards and have to like try and provide value, or there's no reason to continue this conversation, it like kind of it's like putting your house on quicksand. Like there's just only so much you can build on that foundation.
Yeah, indeed. Yes. Yeah, that's one of the many situations. What I like about authenticity too is that once you feel it and you see what happens when you're in that space, and you see how the world reacts and on all these other things around you, you find that you look for it everywhere, even in how you write messages, or how you do marketing or social media, or how you put it yourself out there. And so when you read something that maybe somebody else wrote, or that you're trying out, and that at least my first gate is like, does this actually feel authentic? Like, would I say this because I believe in it? And if I can't believe in it, and if I just recoil at thinking of saying that, I'm like, nope, wrong message. Changes words around. I am not putting my name next to that.
That's actually why I have a love-hate relationship with ChatGPT. I love like using it for research. I love the ideas that it can generate. I like how quickly it can summarize things. I like how it can sometimes like give you a great starting point. But if I start to read it and any piece of it feels like not my voice, I start to shut down and I cringe and I can't read the rest of it. And I don't want to spend the time to edit it to make it something else. I'd rather just go back and write it myself. And so I have this like continual back and forth where I probably just need to let that one go and figure out how to use the pieces that are helpful. But once I do read that and I feel like, oh God, that's not what I would say, that I like it starts to derail.
Yes, very quickly. Very quickly.
It's one of the things that made me both an okay and a terrible editor for other people's papers. Because I'd like read it and I'd be like, oh, that's great. And they'd be like, oh, I wouldn't say it that way. And I'm like, maybe it's not about how I would say it though.
Yes. That would be difficult when you're somebody else. Yes, I run into that every once in a while with the Jeff Spokes when he will say something and I'm like, why are you saying it that way? Because that's how I say it. I'm like, okay, not how I would say it, but it's your book, not mine. I think that's why he stopped asking me to read his books.
Found a different editor.
Yes, found a different editor.
Oh, God, that's funny.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, this is clearly a topic we are very passionate about, and we already talked much more about this intro than we have about any other ones. So this one's lot of authenticity.
3 years into a podcast on authenticity, I would hope so.
Yeah, which is a good testament to how much staying power and how much core power that authenticity has. If there's 3 years and there's so much more exploration still to do, both in self and others, we've hit something fun here and something that has a lot of potential.
Yeah, definitely. So should we do quick coaching?
Yeah, since we are trying to be an abbreviated one.
Yes, maybe one question. Or well,
one question.
It's always one question. It's what happens after the question that's the problem.
Would you like to choose this time, or would you like to not choose?
I will choose and I will coach.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, fire away then. Shoot that one question out there.
All right. So my one question for you is, sorry, I'm thinking. For me, I should have not chosen to be the coach if I didn't have a question in mind.
There's a lot of really good questions on this. It's hard to choose.
I know. We did prepare. We have a bunch of questions, and it's hard to choose one. Oh, yeah, those are good ones. What's preventing you from being authentic? Let's start there.
That's a wide one. Is there like a specific scenario? I guess my thoughts are more focused than the last recording, so this won't be quite as meandering. What's preventing me from being authentic? Mostly it comes out with any time that it's some fear of judgment or the thing that really, I guess if I was to pick one of the big buckets where this comes out most, it would be fear of judgment in a relationship. And I know enough and experienced enough authenticity at this point to know that generally if there's enough of that, or if that's a continued pattern in a relationship, then it's time to either change or leave that relationship. And I think that I end up in more often delayed in trying to get to that authenticity when I have that fear, because then it might be like losing a relationship, or I might have to change that. And sometimes I just don't want to let that go, even if I can feel like that's not an authentic space. And then it ends up kind of compounding, because then you kind of have to act inauthentic to stay in it. And you kind of know you shouldn't be. And it's, or I know I shouldn't be. I'm using the royal you now, and then we're pointing this out as if it's like everywhere else. This is my personal experience on that, is that I feel like I should change to try to keep a relationship. And in a lot of ways, being highly relationship focused has been very beneficial for me. But there is that, if it's not an authentic relationship, it can be very costly to only focus on the relationship and try and maintain a connection that isn't secure, isn't authentic. So I think that's the fears that come up around changing inauthentic relationships tends to lead to other inauthenticities.
That makes a lot of sense. the fear of the loss and everything that's involved with the disconnection of the relationship. That's a loss. So there's still grieving when that happens, even though there's probably grieving happening while you're in an inauthentic relationship. So it's compounded grieving. It's a different kind of grieving. It's a prime. It could be a prime place for gremlins to come out. Any not good enough gremlins to come out. It could be that. And I did hear a lot of shoulds in there. A lot of should stay connected, should work it out, should not lose the relationship. And so how can you look at the relationship in a different way when you get to the point of realizing this is not an authentic relationship and it may be time to let it go?
I think to some of our point earlier before we started the coaching portion, I think that one thing that I don't do a great job of always remembering in the moments, and certainly not always when I get into the mode of like having to like try and protect a relationship, or feeling like I have to like hold up a relationship over being authentic. I think that I lose sight of the cost of that. Like we were just talking about, you get to move at 10x speed. You get to like step into and be in a far greater form of power. And so there's the cost is not just that it is the current energy drain of not being authentic. It's that you're using time and space that you could otherwise use to go build an authentic relationship, to go be part of something, or to go put effort into something that you want to build and want to do something that is more authentically connected to who you are. And maybe it's a different relationship. Maybe it's working on, your business, a passion project, a hobby, just working on your life, being whatever that is. It's not only the energy drain that happens while you're actively, face to face with that person you're in a relationship with that isn't authentic. It's the energy drain afterwards where you have to kind of rebuild yourself, and you've used up so much energy putting up a facade that now you have to go find a way to gain energy back again. So there's a lot of lost time and energy and mental space, and that you could use to something that is much more connected to yourself and who you want to be and how you want to be.
Yeah, very good awareness of the cost, not just at the moment, but in general, before and after, and on everything else. So how, when you think about a relationship where you feel it's an authentic and not authentic, inauthentic relationship, should probably learn how to speak. How do you recognize that's an inauthentic? What makes it inauthentic?
It's the energy spend, almost assuredly. It's how much weight that carries, and it's when you feel like you're pressured to. It's when I feel like I'm pressured to do something that's not. For lack of a better term, authentic, but like to dive in deeper on what that would mean to feel authentic. It's when you feel like you have to. It's kind of like we were talking about, like the intuition, so emotion and intelligence or logic as like three components of decision making, and it's when you feel like you're fighting against your intuition, or you're fighting against you're either repressing feelings, fighting against your intuition, or trying to justify or rationalize something. I think that all of that costs so much energy, and so there's the recognition of it's a couple parts. Like, are you avoiding reaching out to that person? And then if you are avoiding reaching out to that person, why? Is it because you feel like there's some pressure of like, for me, is it like, I felt times where like, I just didn't have like, feel like I had the right or perfect response, or I wanted to be able to like, think about it for longer or whatever. Have I been avoiding just trying to make a decision? That's probably not the relationship issue. That's just something else to focus on. But if it is like that, I don't want to continue to like engage in that relationship, that's a red flag. And if it's after spending time with somebody, there's been like an energy drain and I'm feeling just worn out, that just emotional fatigue, that's like, oh man, I'm so glad to be home, not because like I finally get a chance to rest, but because like I couldn't possibly put this mask on for another hour or whatever it is. Those are the main signs of just that feeling of exhaustion or procrastination and delay in a trying to avoid engaging way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so when you're in these situations, what would your authentic self like to do?
It sure, it really depends on the moment. There are times when it's like, you want like authentic Hulk to come out and just like throw over the table and throw over the relationship and be like, nope, this is who I am, and take it or leave it. And then run and dash out of the room and smash a lot of tables on the way out. There's other times where it's just like, this is not a time or space or energy usage I want, and I want to go get invested in the things I want to be part of. I think usually it just wants to be heard. Usually just it's a matter of wanting to be seen and not wanting to feel like it's not okay to be authentic and to be myself and to be out there. And it's just wanting to feel like it's okay to be in a space, and that the authentic self to be in a space, and to take that space and to just be a part of the equation instead of like an observer to it. It's usually that it wants to be engaged in what's happening.
Yeah, perfectly understandable. It's a big part of being authentic, is being able to be present and engaged in the presence.
Yeah.
So when you think about these types of relationships, how can you recognize what's happening before the cost becomes higher and higher on energy, present and future, and all around?
I have to pay attention to those feelings as they crop up. Usually I let them build up much more slowly. I'll just push it down or ignore it. And there's times where that's useful. Like somebody can just have an off day, and it's not that they're trying to like, not able to connect or not be authentic. It's just they're not there that day. But I often take that too far, and I'll give too many days where it might be like that, or where I'm starting to feel like that it's not possible to engage authentically, and I'm ignoring that feeling long enough that it builds up. So it's more awareness of that feeling in advance, and then tying that back to, okay, the other times this has happened, this is a snowballing thing. It cascades into either like a long-term unhealthy relationship where there feels like there's like no ability to have boundaries, there's no ability to be yourself, and it's just draining, or it just becomes something that you have to rip the Band-Aid off at some point. Those are not here, like paying attention to those signs ahead of time, bringing awareness to them, and bringing awareness to the patterns that have existed before when those came up would, I think, help move to action of like, yeah, okay, so I can either commit to, putting my head in the sand and ignoring this again, or I can do something about this.
That makes sense. What are some of the things that you could do? We talked about the cost of keeping these types of relationships around. What are the benefits?
The benefits are avoiding temporary discomfort, avoiding uncomfortable conversations, and avoiding having to cut out relationships, which is just an uncomfortable process when it feels like you have to get to that point. And avoiding, and that kind of plays into like, well, I guess fighting social loneliness, or feeling like you should have people around, or it would be, I want to be able to have people to be able to connect with and talk to. Realistically, as defined here, these sort of relationships where it's not actually connecting to these people. So it's kind of a false flag to go put it up as like a point of connection, but it is a mental influencer on letting that go feels like cutting off an outlet, even if it's not actually a reasonable outlet.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. There's no doubt that it can definitely be hard for all those reasons. There's a lot of self-preservation that goes into staying in unhealthy or inauthentic relationships. So how can you move forward and know which way you should be going in a relationship when it starts to feel inauthentic?
One thing that's really saved me in the last year and a half especially has been really understanding what relationships have been authentic, and knowing the power of those, and finding some more along the way, especially going through things like the coaching program. Just met so many great people who are genuinely invested in each other, and you want to see them succeed. They want to see you succeed. They're great at like listening, supporting, being there, and you want to be there for them, and feeling those kind of connections. It reduced a lot of the scarcity mindset of like feeling like you have to hold on to every relationship. So there's a huge part of that, of just knowing that there's other relationships to go to and that I'd want to spend my time on those. And it's doing some of that just evaluation work and being willing to look at the scary possibility of I have to change this relationship somehow. And maybe it's a hard conversation. Maybe it's stepping away from the relationship, but having to face down and actually just turn into that decision instead of avoiding that decision about what to do about it and when to do it. That would be the most powerful step to take.
And what kind of support would you need for that?
Honestly, I already kind of reach out to you in those moments. So it's just, I have moments where it's just, I need to rely on those relationships. And so it's, that's also still a personal thing that I have to continue to work on and improve, that I need to reach out at those times. And I've been getting a lot better at that in recent months, and I need to solidify that as a habit, because right now it's still a lot of like reminding myself to do that and then getting into that zone, and seeing the response from actual close relationships has really reaffirmed that those are real relationships, and that those are worth relying on. And it's easier to go step into that over and over again. But I'd like to continue that and make sure that becomes a habit, not just at times where I'm facing something that feels overwhelming or stressful enough that I feel like I have to reach out, but it can also just be a thing to reach out to, just as a potential for support in even non-exhausting or stressful situations.
That's very good awareness. And a lot of wording changes from shoulds to want.
Yeah, that's a huge shift to want. That has been that's a big one. Yeah, that's a good point. I can feel that difference.
What else could help you?
Beyond that, we did that retreat with everybody a few weeks back, last month, whatever, and I really loved the values exercise that we did with Aaron and Lauren, and the reminding kind of myself. You have that great quote that you have about like I want to make sure that everybody can be somebody. How do you phrase it? It's
make sure that everybody feels like a somebody.
Yes, make sure everybody feels like a somebody. That's such a great mantra, and such a great encapsulation of like how you interact with the world and who you just are. And I think coming up with an even more succinct version of that, I started to come up with pieces of that at the retreat, and came up with a few ones that really felt better and connected. And so if I really tuned that one in, I think more, it would be an easier mantra to return to kind of remind like, hey, this is where my actual personal source of power comes from.
Oh, that's great realization, and how to use some tools that you've already, and some work that you've already gone through, and take it to the next step, to go back to your authentic self.
Yeah.
In order to have an authentic life. All right. What else can we wrap up in this coaching session?
Oh, that's good. That's a good wrap. That just helps kind of unpack like how to move forward on sticky relationships.
That's a good word, sticky relationships. As in like they stick like gum under your shoe, or they're sticky because they're good connections?
More the first. Okay. Just can't shake it off, but you feel like you want to.
It's like, get off.
You got to change something about this. Good relationships don't feel like gum on the shoe, and I don't know how to describe them as sticky. Maybe sticky in a totally different
in the
sense.
hair. Gum in the hair relationship. Which relationships in your life feel like gum in your hair? That's a whole podcast.
What peanut butter do you need to apply?
Yes. Or Coke, or haircut.
Yeah. That's a good one. We've got a lot of good comparisons on this one. Makes sense. We've spent a lot of time on authenticity.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, then that's a wrap for you, at least.
Yeah. Time to turn that one around.
Oh, can't wait.
You sound excited. Oh man. Okay. I actually kind of want to start at the same place. It's an open-ended one, but it's let's see where you want to go with it. What's preventing you from being authentic?
That is a good question. What's preventing me from being authentic? I would say, well, I'm not answering the question yet, but generally speaking, I have done a lot of work to not be in inauthentic situations, and to recognize when I am. What usually comes up that's preventing me from being authentic is, well, fear. So when my own gremlin gets really loud, and starts wanting to drive the car. So fear of losing people, I would say, and even then has gone down a little bit. So there's definitely a lot of self-preservation instinct that comes in. I've also learned to recognize how much energy, catabolic energy and effort it takes to be in inauthentic relationships or inauthentic situations that I'm not really willing to give that to go there. And so I'm taking a long time meandering around this answer.
Huh?
I would
It's a
say
big
what prevents you, if I think of situations where I felt like I wasn't being authentic, I would say is when, here's an example, is when a relationship that I feel it's solid and where my authenticity has been able to come out and shine and being accepted takes a turn that's unexpected. And so whether it's a turn that I'm involved in or not, or it's something else, some other external influencers, but when I'm starting to feel that there's lack of harmony, that's when I start questioning who I am and how I need to show up. And so I will speak less, maybe, in situation that I potentially would, because I'm afraid on stepping on toes and I feel like I have to walk on eggshells. I stopped doing the autopilot habits that I would do, especially in relationships. For example, as you know, because you're on the receiving end of that, when I read or see something inspiring, whether it's Instagram or LinkedIn, those are pretty much the only two places where I, would look up for inspiring, like I actually share stuff from, or even a podcast. I guess those are the only, if my instinct is like, this inspired me, I'm going to share it with my inner circle, with the people that this could resonate with, the people that could be entertained by it. And so when I feel like I have the instinct to share it and I stop myself because I don't know where we are in the relationship, that's when I start recognizing that I am not authentic, which is, as you described in your examples or in your sharing, it's a snowball effect, because then I stop being authentic, which usually drives the other person to start recognizing. Sometimes, I don't know, I'm not in their head, but if we actually end up talking about it and clearing the air, it usually drives the other person to think that there's something off, that the harmony is off, so they are not showing up authentically, and then it's just this compounding thing that comes up. The ways that I recognize that, and again, the what could be different things, but the way I recognize that is when I start having a lot of internal dialogues, especially in the shower. That's when I know something is off.
Yeah, that's great awareness of both key things that you like to do authentically, and I like your description of harmony. That's a great way to connect to that. Sounds like there's some ability to be in sync with people for a while you're authentic, and then when there's a disruption in that, it's easy for that harmony to fall out, and then there could be kind of compounding effects on that, where they don't feel the harmony, and then they start to pull away or act differently, and then it can become even more unharmonic, disharmonic. I don't know what the other end of that is. That's a good mental image for how that might work. And you mentioned something interesting up front about how they can kind of be also from some amount of self-preservation. You understand the energy it takes to be inauthentic. How does that self-preservation tie into some of this relationship piece you're talking about?
Fear of being alone. I mean, if I look at my gremlin as being the eraser or feeling invisible, a disconnection or a lack of harmony then puts me in straight into facing the being invisible. If we want to go back to the original question, what's preventing me from being authentic is when I feel like I'm invisible because of the circumstances, because of whatever is going on. But when I feel like I'm invisible, then instead of combating that with authenticity, I now have to question who I am. It makes me question who I am and how I show up, especially when it's from the beginning, I don't even engage. So if it's from the beginning, then I get out. That's where my tolerance has gone to pretty much zero in those situations. Like if I walk into a new situations and I feel invisible, then you know what? You maybe get it half of like a second chance, but probably not. That second chance better be happening in the same interaction. Otherwise, we're out. But when that invisibility shows up in situations where it's not usually there, that's when everything comes into question. And that's when I have, then I have this constant internal battle between, well, if I walk away, I am now alone. And if I'm alone, I'm now, alone, which means, cyber tigers can attack me and I'm done. And if I don't walk away, I have to show up differently because I don't know how to show up anymore. And that's also not acceptable. So it's a lose-lose situation.
So if you find yourself in these situations where there's been some harmony for some time and then there's a disruption in that, and it makes sense that would be particularly jarring, and it makes sense that you've got enough learned experience at this point that you're not going to invest in a new relationship that starts out without harmony, at least enough times in a row, or enough signals that are showing this is not going to jive. So if you find yourself in a situation where it has worked out well for a while, it gets disrupted somehow, what are options you have for addressing that?
So at first is giving everybody the benefit of the doubt, including myself. And so not judging one situation, not judging one interaction, really harnessing the curiosity about what I'm feeling and what's going on with me, which could very much likely have nothing to do with the person that the harmony is broken with. Or it may be, but it's not the main influencers. There could be many other influencers around it. And so a lot of kind of self-exploration, which I should probably do through journaling, but I kind of use my close circle of people as my journals. So I just get to vomit what I'm feeling all over them instead of writing it down. And so that's part of it. And also providing that curiosity for the other person or people involved, and trying to see like what could be influencing this that's not me. So trying to really not take it personally, in the sense of like, I am actually not the center of the universe, so this may not have anything to do with me, and the harmony is still broken or it's still bent. So eventually that needs to get, if it doesn't get resolved on its own, it needs to be addressed. And for that, I usually give it a timeline based on circumstances. Try a couple of tries, see, like, okay, try another interaction, see how it goes, maybe try another one. Depending on the external influencers that may be in play, give a timeline. Is it 1 week? Is it 2 weeks? Is it over 2 weeks is way too long. So probably, like a week or two if the circumstances warrant that. And also look for the shift in energy and see, like, is there an opportunity in the shift in energy? Is the energy of disharmony there all the time with the interaction, or is it just sometimes? And depending on that balance, address it. I'm definitely a big one on addressing it without necessarily making it personal as what did I do? Because maybe I didn't do anything at all, but opening the door for possible sharing. It's like, hey, everything okay? And if the harmony is still there, actually say like, it's kind of feeling a little bit chilly on this side of the relationship.
Mhm.
Anything I need to know? So keeping some curiosity, but also addressing the elephant in the room and not just letting it be there and pretend it's not there. Because I'm like, I feel it, I see it, you feel it, you see it. So can we not dance around it?
Curiously addressing the elephants. That's a great phrase. Yeah, that makes sense. So you've got lots of different frameworks there of like how and where you're going to approach this, and how you might give some space, and what timeline feels acceptable to you, and how you might address this, and wanting to go into that with curiosity. What you've also mentioned, and you mentioned this on a previous session as well. You were talking about that it can be hard because you are very good at jumping in and wanting to directly address the elephant, and other people may not always be in that space. And this is another situation of like, because you're thrown and it might cause some questions, raise a gremlin for you, have the eraser kind of come out and be worried about those pieces. How can you give yourself space in those moments where it's between feeling the disharmony originally and being able to address it?
One of the things that's helped me a lot is thinking, not minimizing the disharmony, but not make it the whole relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about what would my authentic self do without this feeling of disharmony. And so how would I actually show up in this situation had the interaction not feel changed in the last few days, weeks, whatever it is. Well, again, weeks is too long. Days, hours. And then try to see what happens then before, because there may not be an elephant to address, or the elephant may not be between us. It may be just external. And also they may not be the right timing to address the elephant. I mean, eventually, if the relationship is sexually authentic and there's true connection, the elephant is going to come up. It may be weeks later, but it's going to come up eventually. And so try that a few times. And so just think like, what would my authentic self do without this feeling? Would I share the inspiring meme, or would I reach out and say hi? Would I, do that? If the answer is yes, then do it anyway. Even though there seems to be something, but again, that something, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's me, them, something else. So let's see how it goes. If that gets shut down, that's when it becomes a bigger exploration of, is this how it is now? Is this how the relationship is now? And if it is, do I want to accept it? Is this a relationship I want to be continually working on? Or is this it? Relationships end. It's just how it is. Yeah. With that change that we go through life that we talked about, relationships are a big part of that. And it does take decades to get to accepting that, because it's painful every time, but they do. They change. Sometimes they don't end, but the way they were ends, and there's a new way. And some just end. Most just ends.
It makes sense. That's what we were talking about earlier, about there being a constant change in life. So, and being authentic is also being authentic in that change. It's being new to who you are when you are new, and being there for that person. One interesting portion, if we relate back to some of the authenticity in this, you mentioned that when you have that moment and that disharmony, it can sometimes call into question, like, who am I in this relationship, and who am I in this, and on the outside? How can you bring some of your authenticity out in those moments?
It's very hard.
Yeah.
It's definitely very hard, because the immediate reaction and the immediate thought and the very loud gremlin in my head is, you are no longer accepted as who you are. And in some cases, you were never accepted as who you are. So you were disillusioned. You saw something that was never there. And so that becomes really, really difficult to work through. I would say, sharing with others, being able to externalize all the feelings, and and getting, either coach friends or coaching around it helps a ton. For me, I can't process things internally, and I can't process things by myself. And so when I stop trying to, if it's something that I feel it's safe to share, then that's the first, that's the first thing I go to once I notice that the disturbance it's longer than than just a little bit. It's bigger than just like, oh, like there's something off. No, that off is becoming an elephant. And before it becomes a full-fledged elephant, let's keep it at the Dumbo size. And it needs, I need external help. There's always going to be instances in my life where I don't feel that I have the safety to share. And so I do have to process it internally and by myself. There are not many, but every once in a while it'll happen.
What kind of support could you get in those moments where it might have to be alone?
That's a good question. Ironically enough, being allowed to be myself. So if that means I'm not showing up as I normally do, feeling that I'm accepted in those off moments, that helps. Because then instead of spending the energy on the armor, I spend the energy on whatever internal work I need to do. So that I can get back to bigger energy, higher energy.
Yeah. What are some situations in which you feel like you can be yourself? Like you could really bring that out?
As I said, like most of them lately. I don't know. I mean, a lot of it is the work we do. I pretty much feel like I give me myself all the time. I have yet to get sucker punched for being myself, which helps.
That would be a crazy departure from the norm for us. That's probably like honestly time to get a CAT scan. Like somebody's got a brain tumor and things have physically changed.
Yeah. So yeah, the work we do, going on walks, having time for myself, getting away from the situations where I can't feel myself, where I'm more on duty. And it's more about like, I gotta do this and this and this and this, which is usually family related. I mean, there's plenty of moments where it's just fun and being myself, but as a mom in the house, maybe it's 50-50. I'm trying to make it so that it's less than that, but the vast majority of my life is getting stuff done. It's duty.
Yeah. What are things you do that don't feel like duty?
At home?
Yeah, or in general, at home.
Oh, well, most work related. I would say 90% of work related stuff doesn't feel like duty. Except for maybe some accounting stuff at the end of the month and things like that. But even that, it's lower. Or, actually creating project plans instead of keeping them in my head. I would say time with friends. When I get to connect with people. And I've come to the point right now in my life where I feel blessed because I don't waste time with friends. I don't waste connection energy with people that I can't be authentic with. And so it's that space gives me a ton of energy because it's selective and it's intentional. And so that helps a lot. And then, then the basketball practices and the carpooling and the lunches and the school plays. Being at the school play is fun. It's the whole remembering that there's a school play and scheduling around it. Those things become less burdensome.
Excellent awareness and strategies to get yourself into some of that authentic power and zone. So what else do you feel like you want to uncover or poke at in this exploration of finding your authenticity in the hard places?
I think I'm good. I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot more, but that could be hours and hours and weeks, and I'm sure our listeners
might be beyond podcast level.
Yeah, may not want to be around for that one.
Yeah, it's hard to go that deep on a
if you do want to,
podcast.
let's go get some wine somewhere.
Yeah, I think we have that scheduled this afternoon at happy hour, so that'll work.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for just sharing all of those. They're all great ideas and strategies, as well as powerful strategies you've used that keep you in a good, authentic place. And it's good to hear that you feel like you have space to be that in so many arenas of life. That's exciting. Congratulations on forming that life too, because that takes a lot of diligence and practice and work.
Thank you. Yeah. I was told, I think I probably shared it on the podcast, but a couple of years ago, I went to a psychic. And the thing that she kept repeating over and over and over in half an hour was how I was keeping myself small on purpose. And I needed to stop doing that. So I've definitely been intentional about showing up even more authentically because I have that voice in my head. And that voice of, are you keeping yourself small on purpose? And I'm like, no. And if it doesn't go and it's not accepted, then I'm going to leave the room.
That is understandable.
Yes. And this is not my room or building.
Good confidence and good non-scarcity mindset. And as Ray Brown always says, that the opposite of scarcity isn't abundance, it's enough. And there's so much comfort that we found both in business and then what you're describing here, and knowing that there's enough rooms, there's enough other places. It's not even about finding all the other rooms and all the other places. It's knowing that there are ones out there, and having that's kind of feels like almost a trust the process moment.
Yes, definitely trust the process moment.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Right. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for coaching. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening.